Everybody's time. So I think let's go ahead and get it kicked off. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Data Catalogs. We're thrilled to have you here as we explore what's next in the evolution of data management. As data professionals, we continue to see tremendous growth in our data assets, and traditional data catalogs often play an important role when it comes to organizing, discovering, and governing this data. But as business needs evolve, so must our approach to data stewardship. Today, we're going to dive into what's beyond traditional data catalogs, and specifically how one company in particular is leveraging metadata discovery and deeper enrichment to reshape how we leverage data for both operational insights and strategic decisions. So, allow me to introduce today's guest. Joining us is Christian Brameau. Christian is the founder of Meta Integration and a leader in the world of metadata bridges and standards. Over the past 27 years, he's grown Meta Integration into the dominant supplier of OEM metadata technology that makes other products better. He's going to share more about that later. Christian's an engineer by training, a lover of Formula One racing, and a California guy by way of France. So, welcome, Christian. Also joining us from Meta Integration is Mr. Louis Housel. Louis is a 30-year data industry veteran who's also led go-to-market activities for Elation and Informatica, just to name a few. He's a New Jersey guy who spends all his time enrolling his 4 girls in Southeastern Conference schools. Wow. And in his free time, he's a tournament level cornhole master. So thanks for joining, Louis. Next, I'd like to introduce John Wills. John is the founder of Prentice Gate Advisors. John is a 35-year industry vet, having held executive management roles with both Elation and Calibra. And he resides in the Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. John is also a TDAN columnist. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with that, and frequent industry speaker. And he's also the author of The Goal is Autonomous Governance, which was released in 2023. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, lover of all things data. And if you'd like to learn more about me, I invite you to follow my blog on medium.com. Just search for the Better Data SME. Okay, so we have an exciting session ahead, packed with expert insights, real-world use cases, and strategies for moving beyond static metadata. We're going to learn how the right platforms empower data professionals to, as the topic suggests, move beyond data catalogs. Christian's going to introduce you to Meta Integration and the MetaKarta platform at a high level. And though you've probably already used their technology without even knowing it, John is then going to help us baseline those industry trends that are driving the need for expanded catalog capabilities. And then we're going to get to see the MetaKarta platform in action as Louis walks us through a sampling of workflows and use cases that are fueling today's landscapes. But before we get started, just a quick note on some logistics. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat as they come up. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end. And then also know that this session is going to be recorded, and we hope to share that replay at a later date. Okay, Christian, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome to Meta Integration and the MetaKarta platform. Basically, Meta Integration, 25 years of passion dedicated to metadata. I guess the good news today is we don't have to explain what metadata is. It was not the same story 25 years ago, for sure. We started on metadata standards. I personally started on metadata standards straight out of engineering school with ECMA metadata standards, and I moved in US in '92, worked on ISO standard and more heavily on OMG UML and CWM standards for metadata exchange. Well, the problem with standards is there are a lot of proprietary extension and they really don't always work. So somebody had to do the dirty job and make it happen. And we created Meta Integration for basically metadata integration between tools of all these large vendors. That was way before some sort of a company called Facebook took our name Meta, but it was apparently not much I could do about it. So people don't call us Meta anymore. They're back to calling us Meta Integration to distinguish ourselves. At least we see news on TV on Meta now. I should also have a disclaimer. A lot of analysts have called us for years the Switzerland of metadata. We do not have any bank account in Switzerland. That's just happened to be. So how did we grow up? Well, we grew up through OEM agreements. With respect to metadata integration and tool, a lot of the tools 20 years ago had to become metadata driven. And I have to put my hats off to a company called Cognos. When they started their first BI design tool, they wanted to be metadata driven to forward engineer an Irwin model. And that became our first OEM agreements, where the metadata import export menu within Cognos were our software. And it followed up quickly with most design tools, BI design tools, but also ETL design tool like Power Center, data modeling tools like Irwin, or the import-export of Irwin, ER Studio is also our software. And then it became an OEM agreement for metadata harvesting of most data catalogs, for all these years. And many of them we've been working for many, many years. And more recently, Microsoft Purview, and I think the last one was Precisely. So that is what we call the MIMB OEM agreements, which is to provide equal opportunity of all these vendors with the same metadata component software. And some wanted more than just the bridges. They wanted the complete solution. So that ended up being the MIMM, the metadata management OEM agreements, where our entire platform was rebranded under different name, like Oracle Enterprise Metadata Management, or Win Web Portal, or Click Talent Data Catalog. So our metadata management data catalog has been used by hundreds of very large companies over the past 5 years. And that brings us to why MetaKarta now. So MetaKarta, basically, we received a lot of demand from these very large companies in US and everywhere else, where they basically said, look, we have every DI tool that exists, every BI tool that exists, every database. We have some on-prem, we have some on cloud. And we don't want to be tied to one particular vendor. We want a true vendor neutral solution. And can we buy directly from you? And we actually accepted such deals already 5 years ago with one of the largest retailers, and more recently, one of a very large insurance company to sell directly to them. But at this point, we decided to make it more available, hence the name MetaKarta, which is the platform brand name, to bring that to everybody out there. And they wanted to make sure that if they harvest metadata from Power Center, it's the same lineage down to the design level as supported by Informatica, same for, let's say, a Power BI at this level, exactly the same. So MetaKarta is the platform of a software that has been used by many customers for years that we provide directly to customers. Underserved data professional, one of the primary goals out there is the kind of data professionals we have today. Some of them are in IT, some of them are in business users, like a BI user behind a BI report who's trying to understand. And one of the key aspects of this platform is really to connect the IT and the business users. Somebody is deep inside the design of its BI, whether it's a modern Power BI or Tableau or Click or a classic business object or Cognos. They want to understand all the transformation inside and go all the way to the other side and really figure out what's going on in terms of lineage and connecting IT data users with the business data users is really so that they can talk the same language out there. They also wanted enterprise level software that has all capabilities well integrated in one. So hence the name, beyond data catalog, our software is a lot more than just a data catalog. It's a whole metadata version and configuration platform, which is very critical for these people who have on-prem cloud multiple subdivisions. So it's like your own multi-tenant, high-scale catalog out there that they use for that. And you get a complete set of data mapping tools, data modeling tools, process modeling tools, right in there in the same tool set. The high demand also was about predictable pricing. What has been going on is beyond the little POC, then price often explode because you have to pay per user, per named user, per connector, per objects. So we wanted to disrupt a bit that market to do that differently. We believe in this software that anybody with a valid SSO login on the company should be able to access the system. So we do things differently. We measure concurrent users rather than named users, but everybody can access. No limits in connectors and all this kind of capacity pricing out there. So that's why meta integration and why MetaKarta now. That's a quick little intro. I'm going to pass it back to Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. John, I'd like you to help us kind of connect the dots. So, what are some of the critical trends that are really driving the modern data landscape?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it, and thank you, Christian, for the opportunity, and thank you for all the attendees for being here and listening. In my practice and advisory practice with data leaders, analytic leaders, governance leaders, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of the trends and what they're thinking about, not only doing today and trying to accomplish today, but what they're doing in the future. And so I just want to share four of these trends with all of you today. The first one is what I call lineage as a data twin. And really the headline here is that where I think data lineage has always been a very highly valued nice to have, it's actually moving in the priority list for a lot of leaders. It's moving to a must have. And I think there's reasons for that. I mean, traditionally lineage has been great at being a productivity tool for developer types, right? So it could do root cause analysis and help you resolve issues more quickly. It could help you do impact analysis to understand the scope of a development change or a change. I think a lot of leaders are realizing now that in the future, AI-centric capabilities are going to depend on a context and information and a network of knowledge about our core data assets. And that's exactly what data lineage provides, right? This, what I call kind of the data twin of the enterprise landscape. So I think a lot of people are starting to recognize that, and so they're moving in a more intentional way towards trying to have really robust data lineage. The second trend that I'm seeing is what I call headless platforms. So I think we have to kind of all admit that over the last 10 years, we hope that for business users and functional parts of large enterprises, that data catalogs would go viral and that people would see them as the knowledge sharing and gathering tools. And honestly, it just hasn't happened. Adoption has remained pretty low. I think a lot of leaders have come to that conclusion, and so they're trying to solve for that. And I think what I hear them asking for is the ability to surface knowledge and metadata within the platform and tools that people use on a daily basis, right? Don't make them swivel their chair to a separate proprietary UI that's rather technical where they have to search and find something. Just let them in their BI tool, let them in their spreadsheet, surface the correct metadata and the knowledge right where they exist. So I hear that a lot. And so that's why, hence I call it headless. Now, it doesn't mean specialized UIs are going away for the deep data experts. I think those remain. But for the consumer, I think it's pretty clear. And I think we even see some of that as a trend, and even with chatbots and with in the AI world. So the third trend is what I call a return to semantic consistency. Many of you on the call, I'm sure, remember the days 20 years ago when, data management really controlled pretty tightly the naming of things, the models, process models, data models, lineage models, if you want to call them that, and push those down to project teams to try to have consistency across the enterprise, right? There's a reason we called it enterprise architecture. Well, over the decades, right, we've had cloud technology come in, a lot of subscription-based enterprise application tools and platforms. We've distributed data engineering across the enterprise. We've had lots and lots of self-service BI. There's lots of reasons, but that's been decentralized. And so now data leaders are really, I think, saying to me and recognizing they spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy trying to cross-map the meaning of things, trying to stitch it back together essentially. And so they want to move the pendulum back more towards commonality and consistency in the way things are named, the way things are modeled. I don't know if it'll ever go back to where it was, but it definitely, they want to head back that way. So I think, in my opinion, we've kind of reached a low point, and now we're getting some improvement there. The last trend, is no surprise to anyone, right? I call it agentic experimentation, right? So agents, AI, right? We're all looking at that, right? All data leaders are looking at that. My conversations, everyone's trying to balance risk and risk mitigation against value, business value, and maturity, and trying to decide for their enterprise, where do they live on that spectrum, and how soon are they willing to jump into the deep end. But the leading, some of the forward-leaning data leaders, what they are doing is they're starting as a first step, taking some of their workflows and sort of adding AI into the workflow. Just to give you a little example, if you ingest metadata and you scan it and you classify it, and then you have a workflow that automatically triggers a steward to have to approve. Well, some of them are, for instance, experimenting with putting an agent in the middle of that. And so now, after it's classified, the agent takes knowledge of policy, knowledge of context of the system, the data is coming from, and so forth, and then makes a decision whether to route for steward approval or whether it can be auto approved, and so forth. So I think, tip of the iceberg, we're all looking at this, but some data leaders are actually starting to move and starting to experiment with some of these things. So I am super thrilled, and I, again, appreciate everyone listening, and Christian, you having me on. I'm super excited because I see MetaKarta's capabilities aligning really well with what these leaders are asking for, and so I'm excited to hear more. And I know most of you are as well. So, Chris, I'm going to kick it back to you and let you take us forward.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good stuff, especially keeping my eye on the agentic experimentation piece. I think there's a real change in the dynamic coming as we start thinking about how AI actually changes metadata. But I think most people agree that the role metadata is playing is increasingly more important in any organization, regardless of AI, but certainly impacted by that as well. As is, I think, the need for, highly effective metadata management. I think that's always been, either here or the demand is high, but even on the horizon. So it's a good time to learn more about MetaKarta. So I'm going to hand it off to Louis. And Louis, I would love to learn more in detail.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. So over the past, 25 years, I've worked with at least 4 different data catalog and metadata management solutions. So I'm very excited when MetaKarta was available to the public. So although not, a name you may recognize, it's probably being used in every organization you can think of due to the OEM nature. So really, we're taking 30 years of experience building bridges. And some of the reasons why, that led me to MetaKarta first was really the meta model, right? Built day one for enterprise class to be able to help handle robust lineage and to be fully extensible, right? At the end of the day, we believe we're going to provide the broadest metadata bridge support for on-prem, cloud, you name it. No one's going to go back in time and build all the bridges that we have as well. And, most of the large companies out there like to talk about, shiny new tools, but they're using, classic BI tools for financial reporting, some things that are never going to go away. And also, it really has the best in class lineage that I've seen. A lot of other times we try to set people's expectations on lineage really low because we couldn't deliver. Really this looks at everything. It looks at code, it looks at ETL tools. It does a great job at the very different BI tools as well. And then lastly, we want this to make sure that you can make it fit into your company's culture. So because of our OEM nature, this is the most customizable catalog that I've seen as well. And hopefully you'll see some of this in the demo. All right. One of the great use cases that we have as one of our first direct customers is, a very large insurer. They had 2 other catalogs in place, actually. They had over 40 data sources. And really the driving event was they were moving from Oracle to Snowflake. and they needed to make sure that their as-is architecture, all the lineage from the Oracle world, matched up with the Snowflake world. At the same time, they were trying to migrate off of several business intelligence tools as well. So what we were able to do was go in, connect to, over 40 different systems, help them migrate quicker, and really put in a new catalog to be the single point of reference for all their metadata, all their lineage across, on-prem and cloud environments as well. They told us we helped them, complete the migration quicker, and we really had the broadest coverage based on their sources, and we're able to consolidate 3 data catalogs into one. So a great use case we could tell you more about.
Louis, why don't I stop sharing and hand the screen over, and you can take us through the platform.
All right, great. Yep, I think everyone's waiting to see the demo, so we'll go ahead and see that now. All right, can everyone see the login screen?
We do.
Yes.
All right, great. So the first thing, we're about to log in. The interesting thing, this is actually running on my machine. So first of all, this can run anywhere. It can run on Windows, Linux, it can run on your cloud, etc. So we're not abandoning on-prem. So wherever it makes sense to run in your organization is where you'll be able to run it. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and we're going to take a look at the UI. This just happens to be the home dashboard. We customize it for the webinar, but you can customize it in many different ways to put, different graphics, charts, you name it, etc. So one of the first things that I wanted to start with, one of the challenges I found when working with some other data catalogs was explaining what it did to the larger organization, right? A lot of people would talk about, all right, here's the Snowflake world or Tableau world, but it really lacked a 60,000-foot view of what was going on. So if I go ahead and take a look at a feature that we call the architecture diagram, this is really the one place where you can look to see all of the different systems that we've cataloged, all of the different data integration processes, and all of the governance processes we put on top of here as well. So you'd be able to explain it to a C-level or to the data architect team, or maybe you're trying to get a new team to give you their metadata. This shows us a grand view of the world, exactly what's going on in a large organization. All right, so this helps you envision everything. But there's a lot of people who, they live in their, finance department, or they're only using Databricks, and, maybe they don't care about a lot of these things on the screen. One of the nice features we have is called configurations. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our Databricks architecture, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at that same architecture diagram. All right, so now we see a much simpler view, right? We see that there's a staging data warehouse populated by a DI tool that goes into Databricks, and there's only one BI tool, in this case, Tableau, hanging off it. So, a lot of analysts, this is their world, Databricks and Tableau. They don't need to be overwhelmed with metadata about systems they don't have access to or know. So there's a lot of different usage for this configuration feature. So the first thing I want to point out, this is all on one server and one instance. You don't have to set up 3 different instances of the software to accomplish this. This can also be used to help you do dev and prod testing as well. No need to set up 2 servers. And a very unique thing is you can use it to time travel between versions. So let's say you're looking at some BI reports and they used to be correct, and now some of the end users are complaining about the numbers, and you want to know what's changed. You might have a version for the year end. So you can actually go ahead, take a look at these 2 different versions and compare the differences in a graphical place as well. So it could tell you, all right, we changed this column, or this connection was deleted. So, and also the last use case is there's a lot of things that are shared across the entire enterprise, things like a glossary, right? So even if you're in the finance team or the sales team, you might not care about the entire enterprise architecture, but this allows you to segregate things like glossaries. And it's also great if your company's doing acquisitions and you want to keep metadata separate. So there's a lot of use cases for this. We call this configuration. So I just wanted to go ahead and start there. So I'm going to go back to our master configuration. So we're talking about, beyond data cataloging, but we're going to spend 5 minutes showing you the basics of data cataloging, really searching, metadata curation as well. So here we're back to the home page. So we could go ahead and start typing. And you'll notice as I type, it brings up everything related to customer. So we have an advanced search. You could filter on it, etc. But here I can see that I want to go to my customer table. All right. And when I'm looking at the customer table, you're going to see all of the basic metadata you would expect. You can see documentation about the, terms and definitions. We are able to do data sampling. If your security policies allow for that, we can bring in data samples. We can do data profiling to tell you more about your data, etc. Another really interesting thing here, I can see there's a couple of open Jira tickets on here. So I've seen, Jira integration, some other tools, but it's really a one-way. This would allow me to come in here, and if I saw 60 open Jira tickets on this table, I might want to, think twice before using this or figure out why there's so many questions about it as well. All right. You'll also notice that we have all the social curation that people expect in a catalog. So you can put different sensitivity labels on it. I can go ahead and certify things. I can award and endorse things, etc. So all of the typical data cataloging you would expect, documentation, curation, etc. All right. Now I'm going to take a look at a few advanced topics, some things I haven't seen in other catalogs. So the first thing is when I click on relations, the tool automatically builds an ER diagram for you. All right. There's nothing extra I had to do based on the metadata between primary and foreign keys. It's going to build out this ER diagram for me. Right. This diagram is super useful for, more technical people to, understand what's going on here. Like a lot of people, this is their primary language. So we have robust capabilities around ER diagrams. This one we created on the fly based on the metadata that we ingested. We can also import your external ER diagrams. Most large companies have a library of those they want to reuse. And there's a lot of other features you can do in here. You can come in here, and if you have a large picture, you can color code things. You can go ahead and zoom in and out on tables. You can add new entities, etc. So full ER diagramming capability that a lot of data management people expect and have worked with in the past. Another great advanced feature is bringing in things like business process models, right? So, people using data at your organization is not new. It's very likely that there's been some processes modeled out before. So what happens when a new customer gets onboarded? What happens when we add a new user to a BI tool? So if I go ahead and check on the customer invoice business process model, right? This can either, once again, be created in the tool or imported from something you already had. This one, we went ahead and imported from the existing customer, and it can be as complex as needed. The big thing, though, is these are really not valuable till they're tied to the data. So anytime you see the little data icon, we can go ahead and click on there, and that will bring us back to the customer table that was really used in that business process model, right? So once again, full capabilities around business process modeling, not something that's available in every catalog, but very good to get, business and IT on the same page and show people how they actually really use data. All right. The next thing we're going to go ahead and jump to. So in this example, we're thinking about changing the customer table because we had some requests, if we looked at those Jira tickets to add some columns. So the first thing I want to do is see, is this going to impact my BI reports? I know that there's probably a lot of reports based on this, but I want to be sure. So I can go ahead and click on related reports. All right. And this shows me, in this case, there's 37 reports that are going to be impacted. So we definitely want to put some time and thought into this. This also gives you a good idea of how many different BI systems we support. So you can see things like Tableau, Business Objects, Cognos, ClickSense, even Excel, right? If you look on our YouTube channel, we've recently launched Excel Lineage. That's a very powerful and unique feature as well. So here I can see all the different reports that will be impacted. But now if I'm a BI user, I may not live in the data catalog. I may spend all my time in Power BI. So that's where I would want to use this information. So anytime you see this Open With tool, you can go to any one of these reports. And if I click on Open, this brings me right directly into the BI world. And the important thing is we support, about 8 or 9 BI tools. So you could do this in Power BI. You can do this in Tableau. You could do it in things like Snowflake or Databricks. You could do it in Jira, Informatica Cloud. So we're always adding new ways to bring the catalog to end users, because one of John's trends was really making sure that you can surface this where people live. Because usually the largest number of data users is on the BI side, right? They may not be super technical, but you may have 2,000 users at a company, and you want to make sure they can see the information. So let's say I am one of those BI users. I spend most of my time in Power BI. If I want to know more about this report now, I can click on our browser extension. All right. And let me just refresh it there. So when I click on the browser extension, it brings the catalog directly into Power BI in this case, right? So, we started our demo in MetaKarta, but I could have started from this Power BI report. It looks a little odd because there's only 2 customers. I would have expected to see a lot more in here. So I can go ahead and expand this. And this brings me directly from my BI tool to everything that I see in the catalog, all right? And specifically in this case, we can see the very in-depth Power BI lineage, right? Because databases have a common structure with rows and columns, but every BI tool is very, very different. And because of our OEM nature with several of them, we're usually able to build, the deepest, most robust metadata around BI tools as well, because it's all very separate and distinct as well, right? So that shows you a real quick example of just coming from Power BI and clicking the browser extension to bring you back into the catalog. And once again, we support, over a dozen places where that can happen. All right, I'll go ahead and close that out. So now we can see that this is going to impact a lot of our BI reports. But what we really want to spend some time on is the lineage. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the lineage. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this a little bit for the webinar so we can see a little bit more. So the first thing that we do is we always want to make this lineage diagram readable and usable, right? There's no sense in presenting you with, thousands of nodes of spaghetti, right? We want to make sure that you can go ahead and read it and give you a lot of choices to drill into what you want to do. So right now, even though we're showing you a high-level view, this is pretty complicated lineage. It's coming from a data lake on S3 into a staging data warehouse. It's flowing both into a Snowflake cloud data warehouse as well as an on-prem data warehouse. And you can see that it's populating, 6 or 7 BI tools and Excel reports as well. All right, so a very complex lineage diagram, but made very digestible. So what we want to do is now give you some additional ways to explore this. So the first thing I can do is we always get column level lineage, right? That's our basic, standard of lineage. So if I want to see the columns as well, let me just make this a little bigger we can go ahead and see all the column information here. If you click on the column itself, the blue line will highlight the direct lineage as well. So even though there's a lot going on, it's very easy to follow with the eye. All right, we get a lot of good feedback on the UI presentation. You'll also notice now that it's a little bigger that we're going to inherit a lot of the classifications and curation that you do. So if I hover above some of these things here, I can see that, last name was PII. I can see things were marked as good quality or confidential. And if it's a direct passing, that'll flow from, your data lake to your source all the way to your BI tool, right? So you can go ahead and expand it to see the columns. If you just want to look at a smaller view, right now the depth is full. So I'm looking at all stages of the lineage. But if I just want to work my way and figure out what might change, if I change the depth to 1, we're only seeing 1 step in front and 1 step behind, right? A lot easier to digest. I can export this diagram and send it to somebody, but it brings you a very easy way to look at the lineage. All right, so this shows you a lot of the options. Some of the other options we're not going to dive into today is a topic called control flow lineage. So besides the direct passes that you see here in blue, a lot of times other columns can be used in calculations and factor into the lineage. We call that control flow. We'd be able to show you that as well. All right, so this is a very simple to digest lineage view with a lot of different options. What I'm going to show next is behind the scenes, we're tracking the more complex, processes as well. So if I go ahead and I click on my customer ID in a table, I can go ahead and see all of the processes down at the bottom that would use this. So let me go ahead and change this back to full. That down. All right, and go back to my customer ID. All right, so now when I take a look at it, you'll see there's a lot more processes that I've explained it. So on the right-hand side are all the BI processes. So every time that it was pulled into, in this case, Tableau or ClickSense or Power BI, you can dig into that. On the left-hand side is we see the ETL process that loaded it. So this is an example of more complex lineage. So we're going to take a look at that now. So when I show the lineage details there, right, this is where we're going to get the eye chart, right? So this is what we're doing in this case is we're taking a very, normalized table and moving it into our data warehouse. So there's a lot of steps in here, all right? What this lineage could be most helpful for is helping the ETL developer debug what's in here. So instead of looking at the internal data flow view, we could look at the transformation data flow, and now they can see exactly which step they need to work on, right? So whether you're using, Informatica Power Center or Talend, this gives you an idea of the complex lineage that we can look at as well, right? And on the other side of the coin, if you want to see how we treat all BI tools very differently, or even Excel, it's probably a good time to take a look there. You can see everything that's populated down here. So let's say I want to go ahead and look at a BI example. We can see all of the different Power BI nomenclature in there as well. So we'll be able to give you lineage on the BI side as well. All right. So that's about a 5-minute deep dive into lineage. We show you how we can look at different processes. You can toggle back and forth from column level lineage, etc., to get the most complete view. And just remember, this is done, on all types of lineage. We're looking at ETL tools. We're looking at code. We're looking at, stored procedures inside the database, and we're looking at the BI transformations as well, right? Because you want to have the most complete lineage diagram as possible, right? So that's a few minutes on the advanced lineage. Got about 10 minutes left in the demo. So we're going to move on to a few other advanced topics, right? The next thing is when people are cataloging data, there's vast amounts of data out there. You want to be able to automate things quickly. One of the features that is found in some catalog that a lot of people are beginning to look for is data classification, right? So data classification is taking a look at the data and figuring out, is it sensitive? Do we need to protect it to more data? So we do a great job on this as well. We don't think you'd have to go out and, look at a separate solution for data classification. So we do data classification in many ways. We can do it metadata driven. So if your goal is to have no actual data in the catalog for security reasons, we can do, a regex expression on a social security number. So there's a lot of ways to do that. So we call that metadata driven. That's super flexible. Then where you're allowed, we can also look at the data, right? So we can look inside file systems. We can look inside databases. So a great example of this is our very own product ID here. So we can also learn from the data. So rather than us having to put in a regex expression, this is actually going to go look at the data. And this tells us the format of our product code, right? So we can see that it's, letter, dash, letter, and 3 numbers as well. You can also have tremendous flexibility on saying, when should we consider this a match? Because something like Social Security, if you see 1% in there, you still want to look at it. But maybe in the product ID, we can deal with, 10% matches being off. So you can set all the different thresholds. Another great example. So we have thousands of these classifications, over our time in the OEM business. Another great example of how this is more powerful than just classifying the data is our example on Social Security number. All right. So this is the most common example from data classification vendors. So we're going in and, we're looking for a pattern, right? Pretty simple in the Social Security world on US We could have also learned it if it was, a different country's identification number. But here's our social. The important thing here, though, is that when we found this social security number, we can also go ahead and associate this to a term, right? Because really what people do is they want to go ahead and, make different groups out of their classifications. So most people usually start with PII, and you're going to see things like name and age and sex and social security number. So this social security term is going to roll up to PII, and then that PII information may roll up to a higher standard like GDPR. So if we go ahead and take a look at the term that we created, so I'm going to go ahead and search on US social. All right, so here's our US social security number. All right, we could go ahead and see all the detailed here, all the rich metadata. But what we want to focus in on is the data lineage of this, all right? Or really the semantic lineage, because this isn't data in this case. Here we can see that we found our social security number, but it also tells us that rolls up to our PII classifiers, which roll up to our GDPR classifiers. And then lastly, it shows us that this social is showing up in at least 4 places in our data lake that we need to keep track of, and it's marked them as PII as well. All right. So if you have a data classification project, it's very important that it's tied directly to the catalog, because we could go in and start with your data lakes and classify things. And if your data lakes flow into a staging area, into a cloud data warehouse, you get a lot of that classification for free, because we're going to infer that. If it's a direct pass through from your data lake to the staging area to Databricks, you'll be able to see that classification. So doing classification at the source with a tool like this, when you have lineage and things connected, makes it very easy to catalog a very broad estate of data as well. All right. And the last thing I wanted to go ahead and finish on is the idea of, we try to account for everything in the catalog. We've built in a lot of functionality between ER diagrams and BPM diagrams, but we're never going to be able to account for everything out of the box. So the last thing is talking about the extensible metadata model. All right. There's always new types of data structures out there. So we want to make this as easy to extend as possible. So one of the really powerful things about this is not only do we make it very easy for you to extend, let's say you had a table and you want to add some more attributes to it. Very easy to do here in the first column. Let's say you want to create a brand new object type, like an AI use case. You can go ahead and add that in the middle. Or lastly, if you want to create something very complex, right? In our example, we were looking at code set management, right? Most organizations have, industry specific codes. So rather than just put that in a file as reference data, you want to be able to relate that to things. So we could model that out. And if you take a look at show diagram, it shows you the actual model there as well, right? So this is very robust, but what's even more important than having this flexibility, this also automatically creates the UI for you, right? There's nothing extra you have to do. You create this new model type, it creates the UI, and it creates all the import-export mechanisms as well, right? So now it's a first-class object. You can either go in the UI and start adding, data to it, or you can go ahead and bulk load it as well. So anytime you come across the need to model something else out, we're not only going to allow you to do that quickly and easily in the tool, but it's also going to create the UI and all of the integration points that you need as well. All right. So we're just about at the end of time. Christian, do you want to comment on anything else I said in the last 25 minutes or so?
No, you've done an amazing job. I'm impressed to watch the technology. It's very, very nice. As you said, the couple of key factors from the beginning to the end. At the very beginning, when you were on that, I think that's a pillar of our software. It's the metadata version and configuration management. Anybody can build easily a data catalog as a data inventory. But to be real, you need to be built upon solid metadata management foundation. And in our case, it's version and configuration management. So any metadata is under version management, and you can have configurations for these different use cases you mentioned, which are very, very important. You can have sub-companies, you can share a corporate glossary, they can have their own glossaries. It's like a mini multi-tenant within the single server itself for different purpose. And all the way to the end, what you touched at the end, with respect to the meta model management, it's really the ability to build your own meta model. And we didn't think of any better methodology than using the standard object UML standards. So basically you create your objects, you can use aggregation links, you can use inheritance. This is not a hack, this is like a formal modeling in our model. But when you do imported metadata, all these tough, complex meta model, as you said, Louis, in the different BI tools, they're all very specific. There is no one size fits all. This is why in some ways standards didn't work. They find the differentiators. You can say on relational databases, we have the same technology across vendors. As soon as you get in DI and BI, they have their own twist, their own meta models, and even that keeps changing. You need to keep up with that. So whether it's the predefined meta model of imported models or custom models, we take the full range. But the last one is really to get into data governance. If you want to get in data governance, you need to be able to build custom business model for your vertical industry. Can be finance, can be healthcare, banking, and there are standards out there you need to match. So thank you so much for all that. And of course, in the middle, the lineage is key to connect all that. I think we can pass it back to Chris, but thank you very much, Louis, for the demo.
Yeah, great job. Thank you very much, guys. Really, really nice. So we are, and in the getting next to the end of our time period here, we've covered a lot of material here, and it looks like we do have some questions here. So I'm going to try to route those to the right folks. Let me take a peek at this here. I think this one is going to go to you, Christian. Let me paraphrase this. Data catalogs have become a very competitive market with a lot of independent focused vendors. As you talked about DB, DI, BI vendors, right? Everybody has a specific, seems to have a specific niche. It's a really busy space. So where does MetaKarta fit in the mix of this?
Well, that's indeed a good question. I kind of touched on it a little bit before with data catalog as data inventory. Let's step back a little bit. The problem with the word data catalog is now data catalogs are everywhere. So you have to deal with this. If you're a DI vendor, a BI vendor, or a platform vendor like Snowflake or Databricks, you need to have a data catalog as an inventory of all your data stores that you can share between your DI and BI tools. If you provide an integrated solution, you need an inventory of all this. So our perspective is we support all these catalogs as catalogs of catalogs, basically. So for example, we support very well the Snowflake catalog or the Databricks Unity catalog, as Louis mentioned. We not only integrate with them in terms of metadata, but we also integrate with them in terms of UI. You can start from the Databricks Unity catalog and then automatically find the external lineage out of that. So that's one type of catalogs. There are also the catalogs of, I would say, very different approaches, but are just an inventory. And I think those have not been sufficient in the industry. We've been a proliferation of a very basic inventory data catalog with basic lineage, but are not getting there. So MetaKarta is really intended to get into the deep solution that goes, way broader than just an inventory of data stores. There are also open source, which is a new twist of a new twist on standards. As I said, I mentioned a lot of standards. We were working on common meta models between these different tools to exchange metadata. The new open source approach is not so much about standardizing the meta models. They don't come with meta models, but it's more a platform like Atlas, for example, which is a good platform. But just like as we face with the OMG, UML, and CWM in the old days, everybody ends up doing their proprietary extensions. So the platform is no longer a standard. So we actually noticed itself as we work with different OEM partners, some of them based on the Atlas platform, but they had to change it so much that even if we support one partner on Atlas, it's a different Atlas for the other one. So that's a little bit the answer. So MetaKarta wants to be vendor neutral and really deep into the lineage, basically.
Great. Okay, I think this one is for you as well. Is MetaKarta only available on the Meta Integration Cloud, or is it also available either on-prem or in a customer's private cloud? And if you could, Christian, maybe just explain the difference, if there is one.
Good question. That's also a big differentiator on that aspect. I think I touched about it a little bit at the beginning, but we do, and Louis mentioned that, I believe, as well. We do not have a software on-prem, on cloud. It is the same, basically, platform that can be deployed anyways. We call it, we don't call it on-prem anymore. It's either available on our cloud, the Meta Integration Cloud, but it's also available on your cloud if you want. And it's called it vendor cloud manage or customer manage. And if it's customer manage, that deployment can be on-prem, on your data center, on your private cloud. Let's not forget a lot of these guys are also have a much more affordable access to a lot of cloud platform, but you control it basically. So there is no different software. You can unzip and run on Windows, on Linux. You can use Kubernetes containers, or you can use our deployment. That's the key thing, is there is one software for all. The same way that there is one software for all for bridges. You know, the connectors, if we do an improvement for Microsoft on Power BI, or for Informatica on Power Center, or on parsing of Sparks or a Snowflake SQL, it is the same code that is provided to all OEM partners as it is provided to you on the platform. This is why we are on continuous deployment. In fact, there are continuously new features, new improvement, and of course, the forever security updates. You know, we got to keep up with third-party products. These are very important. One platform, OEM or MetaKarta, the same.
Good. Pardon me. I love that. Okay, I think this question may be for you, Louis. MetaKarta has more than just data capability. We've seen that. There's a lot of extended functionality like data modeling, process and business modeling, integration, etc. I think the core question here is, are these tools paid add-ons or upcharges? Talk a little bit about how that pricing works.
Yeah, the nicest thing is we have, 4 different versions you can see on our website. But, the most common version includes everything, right? Especially the metadata connectors. We do not want people to decide what should go in their catalog based on cost. So, our biggest strength is connecting to, hundreds of different applications out there. So we definitely, have most people start with the version where you can connect to everything, and you can certainly use the BPM capability. So it's all, one platform, so you don't get nickeled and dimed on that.
Yeah, perfect. I think customers would definitely appreciate that. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today.
I might add a little bit more, Chris, if you don't mind. Again, I also mentioned that at the beginning with respects to all these tools not being an add-on, as well as the connectors not being an add-on, is really we don't, if you do especially customer manage, there is no extra cost from your initial POC as you scale up, basically, because we include all these connectors, we don't count the objects, and really, we don't count name users, which are too difficult to manage. SSO, if you have a login in the enterprise, the idea is you come from your BI and MetaKarta comes to you. Basically, that's the idea. Back to you, Chris. Sorry for getting back on that, but thank you.
No worries. Perfect. we are going to run out of runway here from a time perspective. So we covered a lot of ground. If you're interested to learn more about the MetaKarta platform, the best way is really to visit the platform website. I have it here. We'll put it out in there's a link, but it's metakarta.com. And if you jump out there, you're going to find a ton of stuff. Christian did a great job on why MetaKarta. A lot of the platform capabilities, some of them we didn't go into detail today. You can learn more about that there. You can see some of the premier customers who are actually using the platform right now as a standalone MetaKarta. And then connectors, everybody always wants to know about how do you connect to various things in your ecosystem. And then lastly, and I think this is important, any next steps, right? Would you like to see a demo? Would you like to have a meeting with the team? Get out to metakarta.com, explore that. And thank you so much, everybody. I hope you found today's session valuable and interesting. We appreciate everybody's time. And on behalf of the panel, I hope you have a great day for the rest of your day. And thanks for joining us. So until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.